I am Nomi Joyrich, and I am the Michigan Director for Jews for a Secular Democracy. And this presentation is Know Before You Sign. There are many ballot proposals that are either already we know they're going to be happening, or they're somewhere in the works. And this presentation is to try and have everyone understand what they are so that you can know before you sign. Sorry, I'm having a slide. There we go. So there are three kinds of ballot proposals, and this time around, we're going to see each of these three. There are constitutional amendments. There are ballot proposals that enact state law, but don't add it to the Constitution. And there are referendums, which are to repeal a law. So each kind requires a different number of signatures. I'm not going to go into all of those details, but it's based on a percentage of the voter turnout at the last gubernatorial election. And signatures have a 180-day window to collect all of their signatures. So before I talk about what each ballot proposal is, I just want you to know what the rules are for circulators. And there are going to be some petitions you feel very strongly about, either positively or negatively. So I want you to know what your rights are too, just as a voter. So it's important to know that most circulators are paid, and they may not understand their proposals. And they're paid based on how many signatures they get, so they have a vested interest in wanting you to sign. There is no requirement for circulators to understand the proposal, to accurately or honestly represent the proposal. A circulator has the right to say anything they want about the proposal. The responsibility for understanding the proposals, it lies 100% with the person who's signing it. So as a bystander who might just have strong feelings, you're allowed to stand near the circulator. You're allowed to talk to other people who are around the circulator. You're allowed to try and educate people there. You can't touch their petitions unless you're taking it, to sign it. And you absolutely can't damage or destroy anybody else's petitions. That is a violation of law. So you'll notice as I go through the proposals that there are some proposals that absolutely conflict with one another. So if competing proposals pass, then the court will decide which part of the proposal can stand at the same time. But wherever there's a conflict, the conflict will be decided by which proposal had the highest vote total. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So the first section of proposals is about voting. As I want to say, as a nonpartisan organization with a very laser-focused mission, most of these proposals I have no official position about. I have my own personal opinions about all of them, but I have no official position about most of these. The voting ones, because we see some of these voting proposals as a direct attack on democracy, which is part of our mission, we do have an official position on. So first, I want you to understand, and probably since you're working in voting, most of you probably already understand what the status quo is, but let me just review it. Currently, voter registration is available online, through the mail, or in person. There are many different ways that you can prove your residency when you're registering to vote. If you don't have a photo ID, you can sign something called an affidavit that swears to your identity and your residency. It is a felony offense for non-citizens to attempt to vote. Non-citizens who attempt to vote are subject to prison, to fines, to deportation. And as a result, it is extremely rare for non-citizens to attempt to vote. There are a few municipalities that allow non-citizens to vote in local elections, like your city could pass a law that said in your city, non-citizens could vote for city council or mayor, but it is never allowed anywhere in the United States for non-citizens to vote in any state or federal election. And approximately that is 4 zeros, 0.0000 to 8% of ballots are cast by people who don't have the right to vote. So we know that non-citizen voting is a very rare occurrence. There are currently two efforts to mandate proof of citizenship voting, and they're extremely similar to one another. So I'll talk about them both mostly together, but also try and explain a few of the differences. Committee to Protect Voters' Rights, which is also using the name Prove It Michigan, is a state-based effort that was propelled by Representative Brian Posthumous. And this is both of these are fairly close reflections of the federal SAVE Act. The second initiative is by Americans for Citizens Voting, which is a national organization, and they are proposing pretty much the same proposal at many states in the country, especially swing states, like Michigan is a swing state. So they both propose requiring something called documentary proof of citizenship. You'll hear me talking about this term again, DPOC. So DPOC is documentary proof of citizenship. It's usually a passport. Sometimes it is a combination of other documents. I'm going to go into that more in a few slides from now. So here's a comparison that kind of explains the difference between these. So the Prove It Michigan requires the DPOC for all new registrations. It doesn't list what documents meet the requirement. And it is also, even their own lawyer said it was unclear from their proposal whether this referred to only new registrations or also to updated registrations, like if you move. If you try and vote and you haven't proved your citizenship, your vote will not be counted. It will be something called a provisional ballot. And then you have 6 days after the election to go and improve your citizenship. And it requires the Secretary of State to review existing voter rolls and remove people. The Americans for Citizens Voting is for every election, every voter, every election will be needing to provide their proof of citizenship, and including absentee ballots. And it also has the addition that it creates criminal penalties for any election workers who don't comply with it. And it allows for any citizen to challenge someone else's right in court. So if I go and I see my neighbor voting, I can challenge them and say, I know that this person isn't really a citizen. And as you can imagine, this last section does create a lot of opportunities for some bullying and harassment. Uh, Prove It Michigan leaves a lot of things up to the legislature to decide. Oh, I also should say both of the proposals have something in there that says that for cases of hardship, that the state will provide, that will fund your identity, getting your identification. It does not say what is hardship, how is that determined, what will it pay for? Will it just pay for a birth certificate, but you really need a passport? Will it pay for you having to take a day off of work to go down to the Secretary of State's office? Will it pay for your childcare? Probably it won't pay for any of those things, but it is not determined how it will be paid for. It also is not determined how absentee ballot voters prove their citizenship. So for both of these here, they have pretty much the same implications. There are about 10% of eligible voters who don't have these documents, and it absolutely disproportionately impacts people who are low income, people who have changed their name, college students, people who are disabled, elderly, formerly incarcerated. It really disproportionately impacts them. We know that the real ID will not be sufficient. A real ID does not prove your citizenship. It means that you must register in person. It gets rid of the option of signing an affidavit of identity. There's a cost even for people who don't have, a demonstrated hardship. It still is expensive. There will also be additional cost to run the elections. This could potentially disenfranchise tens of thousands of Michiganders and it adds a lot of red tape to the process of voting. Red tape, red tape, red tape. It's really going to create a lot of red tape. So supporters say this is going to increase election security and make it so that non-citizens can't vote. And opponents say this is going to add red tape and it creates obstacles to voting and disenfranchises voters. So, as I said, this is a petition. These petitions we are actively opposing because they're disenfranchising voters. Voters Not Politicians does have a spotter hotline. So if you call the spotter hotline, and I would love for everyone to take down this phone number, if you're at the farmer's market and you see someone collecting and you call the spotter hotline, they have a group of volunteers on call that try and go to places where these signatures are being collected so that they can talk to voters and explain to them what all the implications are. Are there any questions about these two proposals before I move on? No? Okay. Election reform. So ranked choice voting is it's I find it a little complicated to explain. So bear with me. This would be a constitutional amendment that radically changes the voting system so that voters can rank candidates by preference. So it's also called an instant runoff election. So if your first candidate doesn't have the majority, then your vote is then counted for your second choice. If your second choice doesn't get the majority, it's voted for your third choice, etc. And this goes on until one candidate has a majority. And by a majority, I mean 50% of the votes plus one vote. It will not apply to every election. It will apply to president, Congress, US Senate, governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. These are in the proposal in Michigan. These are the only elections that ranked choice voting would apply to, but it also makes allowances that if your local municipality chooses to institute ranked choice voting for other elections, then they have the right to. The other thing this would do is it brings the primary early. The primary is currently in August. It would move it to June, but this is for the state primary, it has no impact on the presidential primary. I have taken these screens directly from Ranked Choice Michigan's website to explain. In the first choice, we have here Luke Skywalker gets 60% of the vote over Darth Vader. But then Princess Leia decides that she would also like to get in on the mix, and they pretty much split the vote. They split the anti-Darth Vader vote, and so Luke gets 25%, Leia gets 35%, and Darth Vader ends up winning. But with ranked choice voting, we're assuming in this model that anybody who is voting for either Luke or Leia are choosing each other as their second choice. All of Luke's votes, he doesn't get the majority, get switched over to Leia, and she wins the majority with 60%. So obviously, this is a great simplification, and there could be many more candidates than just three, but that gives some idea of how it works. So supporters say this allows voters to vote for their preferred candidate without fear of wasting your vote. And it results in electing a candidate who might not be everybody's first choice, but who is at least acceptable to the majority of voters. Opponents say it's confusing. It can increase ballot fatigue, which means that we might see a drop off in the down ballot voting in the down ballot races. And there's also a concern about transparency. Like the votes aren't just reported, in the same way that we're used to having them reported. Before I go on, are there any questions about Ranked Choice Michigan? Okay. This is also an election reform, Mop Up Michigan, which is, oh, Nina, yes.
I did have a quick question. Has this been brought to any other states just yet, or is it like the first state they're trying to bring this to?
Ranked choice voting?
Yes.
No, it is in other states. Like, first of all, and I don't remember all the states it's in. I know for sure it's in Alaska, and I know
Mhm.
it's in New York City, but I'm not sure if it's in all of New York. So I don't know which states it's in, but yes, it's definitely in other states as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Michiganders for Money Out of Politics, which is also shortened as Mop Up Michigan or My Mop. And this would ban the state's utility companies and any corporations that hold a state contract worth more than 250,000 from contributing to the election, either to candidates, campaigns, or PACs. And it would also ban any corporation um, of for if there's a corporation that already got a $250,000 contract or more, then they cannot make a contribution for at least 18 months. So the language has not yet been submitted to the Board of State Canvassers. The other ones that I've talked about have already been approved by the Board of State Canvassers. This one, it hasn't been submitted yet, so there are some details that are probably still working out. Um, Supporters say this will help get dark money out of politics and it will lessen corporate interest in governments. Opponents say companies have a right and an obligation to advocate for their best interest, that the PACs, the corporate PACs, are not, those contributions don't come from customers, they don't come from fees, they come from employees who have collectively used their voice and that they have the right to do that. So this is the pros, what opponents and supporters say. Are there any questions about my map? Okay, tax reform. This is another example of competing proposals. So we'll see what gets on. So the first one is Axe My Tax, and this would eliminate all property tax in Michigan, 100% of property tax, business taxes, residential taxes. It also eliminates all millages. So you probably know that there are a lot of, your school district, your community might have passed a millage to help fund your school or your library. Currently, there's a millage, a tri-county millage that helps fund the Detroit Institute of Arts. There are other county-wide millages. This would immediately stop all of those millages. And it's a percentage of the lost funding would come from reallocating other portions of Michigan taxes. It would also require that any future taxes or millages would require 60% voter approval or two-thirds majority in the legislature to ever increase taxes. So it would make it extremely difficult to increase taxes in the future. So supporters say this is what true property ownership is, that this is property tax is the only thing where people worry, like, I already bought my house and now if I don't pay my taxes, I could lose my house. This is something unique to property taxes. I've taken this straight from the Axe My Tax website, where they say there are thousands of other ways to fund these things. They do not explain what these thousands of other ways are, but this is from their own language. Opponents say this would cut about $20 billion in funding for schools, roads, recreation, public safety, everything the state pays for. And the proposed reallocation would make up a very small percentage of the lost funding. It would result in massive funding cuts to public schools. Some people say that it would completely defund all of Michigan's public schools, and it would make it almost impossible to increase taxes in the future. Does anyone have any questions about Axe My Tax?
Yes.
Yes.
Um, do any other organizations promoting or going against this have any numbers to prove this?
Um, Well, Axe My Tax, they have not stated numbers of how they do state numbers in their proposal of exactly what percentage of sales tax and also tax from uh, they're trying to reallocate tax that comes from pot sales and maybe from alcohol sales, but they don't have numbers of exactly how much money that will come up with. I believe that the $20 billion in funding for schools, of lost funding, I can't remember which organization did that analysis. So I know it's been done, but I don't know which organizations did it.
Thank you. I'll do a little research.
Yeah, please do, and then let me know. And I will say that for all the anybody who comes to this, I will be sending a Google Doc that I keep updated, because all of these are moving targets. As things get approved, as things get off, as efforts get dropped, I will be keeping the Google Doc updated, so you don't have to come to a new presentation every month. So this is another tax reform called Invest in My Kids. This would also be a constitutional amendment that would create a new tax where for individuals making 500,000 for a single return or couples making $1 million for joint returns would have a 5% tax increase. That money would go directly to the state's school aid fund, and that money can only be used for the schools. It prohibits it from using it for any other purposes. There will also be an audit. And what supporters say, this would increase funding to allow us to lower our class size, to recruit more teachers, to improve facilities, and ultimately to improve academic achievement. Opponents say, first of all, they don't like that the proposal does not call it a tax. The proposal calls it a, quote, fair share surcharge. And opponents say this is misleading. It's a tax, and they should call it a new tax instead of using the fair share surcharge language in their proposal. The opponents say this could hurt businesses and investment, and it unfairly advantages public schools over private schools. Opponents say that poor achievement in Michigan has nothing to do with lack of funding, and that this is not the way for us to increase our academic achievement. And any questions about Invest in My Kids? So other proposals. One fair wage. So this is a referendum. And remember that a referendum is to repeal a law that's already been passed. I'm going to go into has a very complicated history, but the effect of this would be that it would end the sub minimum wage. So the sub minimum wage is if you are like a server, if you're a tipped worker where the majority of your wages come from tips, not from an hourly wage or a salary, then you currently receive a sub minimum wage, which is approximately 30% of the full minimum wage. And the effect of this would be to get rid of the sub minimum wage. So I'm going to give you a brief history of this to try and make it make sense. In 2018, One Fair Wage submitted its signatures for a ballot proposal that would raise the minimum wage and phase out the sub minimum wage. That means that tipped workers would receive their regular minimum wage as their base pay, and then any tips would be on top of their wage. So in 2019, every poll said that this was going to pass. It was polling at like 65% or something like that. There was a Republican-controlled legislature, and this was the final days of Governor Snyder's time in office. They knew it was going to pass. They didn't want it to pass. So instead of letting it go to the ballot for voters to decide, they took the option of adopting the proposal, which the legislature is allowed to do for proposals that not for constitutional amendments, but for state laws. And then they immediately, during the lame duck section, amended it so that it essentially gutted the intention of the proposal. So starting then, it's been in the courts. It's been this long legal battle, and maybe most people probably weren't aware that it was still in the works in the legal system until 2024, when the Michigan Supreme Court finally heard this case and said it was unconstitutional to adopt and amend, and it reinstated the original law which was the original language of the ballot proposal that One Fair Wage put forth in 2018. Now, it's important to know that the Michigan Supreme Court was not weighing in on whether this was a good law or a bad law. They were only weighing in on this process called adopt and amend. And so right before this law, One Fair Wage law was going to come into effect, the Michigan legislature passed a law that said it was going to keep the sub-minimum wage, but increase it from 30% to 50% of the regular wage, and that it would gradually increase the minimum wage to reach $15 an hour by 2027. And now there's a ballot proposal to repeal the 2025 law, which would restate the original 2018 proposal, essentially ending the subminimum wage and increasing the minimum wage to reach $15 an hour by 2030, so a little bit later. So this is the history. And right now, here's the status quo. Tipped workers make sub minimum wage of 14 dollars an hour. There's a typo there, plus tips. And the regular minimum wage is $10.56 an hour. The sub minimum wage will gradually increase, and the way it works, the current law that was passed in 2024 by the legislature, that it will increase to $7.50 an hour plus tips by 2031, and then it will increase with the rate of inflation, and the regular minimum wage will increase to $15 an hour and then go up with inflation. So the status quo is that it keeps the sub minimum wage but increases it. If the referendum passes, the sub minimum wage for tipped workers will completely phase out, and it will raise gradually until it fades out. And eventually, by 2031, there will be no sub minimum wage, and the minimum wage for everybody will be $15 an hour. So supporters say this referendum honors voters' original intention before the legislature started interfering. There are other states that have done this, have gotten rid of the sub-minimum wage, and that servers saw an increase in their pay. The restaurant industry did not suffer. Servers were able to keep their tips on top of their base wage, and it increased pay for a workforce that is really historically impoverished. Opponents say that that this is going to destroy the restaurant industry, that restaurants will be forced to raise their prices. Customers are going to tip less because the prices are higher, and it's going to result in a decrease in pay for servers. So we have opposite predictions of what will happen. I will say that there are other states that have implemented this. Are there any questions about this?
I do have a question actually. So
Yeah.
you already mentioned that there have been other states that have rolled out these policies already. Do we have any info on how that went with the other states? Have there been any pushback since those policies have been implemented or anything of the sorts?
So supporters of this referendum state that they have analyzed the states that have already passed this, and that restaurant industry did not suffer, and that servers made more money. That's what their analysis has shown. And I think that how people feel about it also depends on which state, and different states have different economies. And so I think that opponents are saying, even if this worked in Washington state, doesn't mean it's going to work in Michigan. The economics, the culture, everything is different.
Got it. Understood. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that is everybody's question. It's an excellent question. Any other questions? Okay, so there are a number of other efforts. These may or may not gain traction, so we will wait and see whether they gain traction. The bottle bill. This is one your group might be interested in. This would make all water bottles eligible for deposit, which currently, single-use water bottles are not eligible for bottle deposit. It also determines what to do with any money from unclaimed deposits and makes it so that you can do a universal return. So anybody who sells bottles has to uh, accept them as returns. This is being pursued by the Michigan Environmental Council and also by Senator McCann. Senator McCann, who I believe is about to be termed out, has introduced the bottle bill in the legislature every year that he's been in office, and has never gotten any traction in the legislature. And now there is talk of it being a ballot proposal. Education. So former Governor Snyder announced that he is going to spearhead a proposal. His aim is to improve third grade test scores. We have no idea at all what he is going to include in the ballot proposal. We only know that it is not going to include anything about increasing revenue. So any details about what he's going to do are yet to be known. Michigan marriage equality. I will say that if this becomes a ballot proposal, that we meaning Jews for a Secular Democracy, will also take an active stand on this, because marriage equality is a question of church-state separation, and those are the issues where we get involved. The only arguments against marriage equality are religious ones, so we will support. If there's a marriage equality proposal, Jews for a Secular Democracy will support it. This would be a constitutional amendment to enshrine same-sex marriage rights into the Michigan Constitution. You should know that in 2004, Michiganders voted to ban marriage equality in Michigan. In our Michigan Constitution, it states that marriage is only between a man and a woman. The only reason why that's not enforced is because of the 2015 Supreme Court decision that created marriage equality. If the Supreme Court reviews this decision, as it did, for example, with reproductive freedom with Roe v. Wade, if the Supreme Court reviews this decision, and we expect that they're going to, and throws it back to states to determine whether or not they allow marriage equality, then Michigan doesn't have to do anything. It's already against our Constitution. So this proposal would change our Constitution to guarantee marriage equality, including all of its many benefits that come with being married, including the right to make medical decisions, to visit your spouse, to have joint coverage, inheritance, joint adoptions, parental rights, all the rights that come with legal marriage. This would protect it in Michigan. This ballot proposal seems to be in its infancy stages. I don't know if this is going to get off the ground or not, but this is one that I know I personally am going to be taking a close look at. Are there any questions about any of those? Okay, so I also want to talk about Proposal 1, the CON-CON. This is not something that is going to be collecting signatures. It is in our Michigan Constitution that automatically, every 16 years, there is Proposition 1 is asking whether or not we want to have another constitutional convention. If there is a constitutional convention, then there will be one delegate from every legislative district will be elected. They will run for office just to be a delegate, just the way everybody runs for any other elected office. And then the delegation can amend or rewrite any part of the Constitution. They could decide we're not changing anything, we're changing this one comma to a period, or they could say we're throwing it in the trash and we're starting all over again. After they come up with whatever the new Constitution is, then voters will have an opportunity to approve or reject the new Constitution. So this is up every 16 years. So far, since it's been up, nobody has ever campaigned for it. It has always been overwhelmingly rejected, like something like 2 or 3 to 1. This year is the first time in my life that there is most likely going to be a strong effort to get this to pass. And that is because there have been so many progressive changes made in the last several years. The gerrymandering with the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, abortion rights, all the increased voting rights. These are all progressive changes that a lot of people love and a lot of people don't like. The Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, has already said that he is in support of having another constitutional convention. So I believe that this year there will be a concerted effort coming, especially from the right, to pass the con. I would say to I would say to voters, if you are satisfied with our Constitution, and you like the changes that have been made in the last several years, to vote no on CONCON. And if you hate our Constitution and you don't like those recent changes, to vote yes on CONCON. But this will be a big topic of conversation this election. Any questions about the CONCON? So the bottom line is to know before you sign. Be sure you fully understand the proposal before you sign any petition. You can feel free to contact me, especially if you get new information. If you hear about a proposal that I might not know about, please contact me and tell me. If you want me to come to your house of worship or to your or another organization to present about this, then please contact me. I am definitely trying to get the word out so that people know before they sign. And any other questions?
Will you send us this YouTube video when you're done editing it?
I can, yes. And I will also send you, what's even more useful to have will be the Google Doc, because the Google Doc I will keep updated as things change. And yes, will send all of that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to just be clear that every proposal I've just talked about is only Michigan. I'm only talking about things going on in Michigan.